Hey guys, what is up? Unrested back again and doing a Silent Hill rundown as I promised. What are my thoughts, feelings, concerns about the future of these brand new Silent Hill projects? Well, first of all, let me just say I'm excited. Um, you probably already know I'm a massive Silent Hill fan. I love everything about Silent Hill. I love the music. I love the atmosphere. Maybe the only thing I don't love about Silent Hill is those two that were made by the American team, Silent Hill Homecoming and Silent Hill Downpour. I bought them and I played them, and man, they were bad. I have no other thing to say about them other than they were bad. I almost just want to cast them out as even counting as Silent Hill games. Origins was okay. That was made by a UK team, and I didn't mind that so much. But oh god, especially Homecoming. I remember I bought it for PS3, and from the second you wake up in that game, when it first came out, there's already a glitch where like they don't have the right button press connected to how you're supposed to sit up properly on the bed. And I remember from the second I started playing it, I thought, what did they do? And I just remember the rest of the game just totally sucking. No scares, music's kind of bland, character is bland, story is bland. Don't feel like I'm in Silent Hill. Ugh. Anyway, sorry. I didn't want to start it out by complaining. That's horrible. But the next thing I wanted to cover here, and I have it written on the list, is Konami. How do I feel about Konami? God, I really hated Konami in the past. I hated how they treated Hideo Kojima. I hated how they treated Guillermo del Toro. Norman Reedus, Silent Hill PT. I kind of wonder if this is them turning over a new leaf. I know some people have left Konami, and I'm hoping the people that did leave or get ousted were the bad apples. Maybe over the time of the disease, which we cannot mention, the virus we cannot mention, that they kind of took a look at how nothing was doing very well and how they were losing loads of money, because what they tried to do was dump everything into pachinko. But guess what? Nobody played during the time of the virus. Pachinko. Every single pachinko place was closed. So they probably lost loads on that and realized, oh, maybe we need to have other options and turn this back around. So I'm hoping that's what's going on, that there's a new influence there that's a little more open-minded to creativity. It does seem like they're being a little more laissez-faire, hands-off with these titles. But we'll get into that as we talk about it. So let's talk about, first of all, the overall presentation I thought was pretty well done. I realized they had to be very vague because they couldn't drop a ton of information on these because it's still very beginning sketches of what these games, movies, characters, interactive media, toys, everything that they're coming out with is going to be. I do kind of wonder why they did one massive dump and why they didn't just do kind of a trickle effect or a slow release. I feel like that would have been much better to do rather than hit everybody over the head with this massive pile. But hey, honestly, I'm just happy to see the entire premise revived. I feel bad for Metal Gear fans. I feel like that was an amazing series too that we'll never see more of. That's fine though, whatever. At least we got our Silent Hill back. Yay. Silent Hill Townfall, I believe, was the first one that they showed off. And first of all, let me just say I'm really excited by who's writing for this game. If you don't already know, Silent Hill Townfall is going to be written by No Code. No Code did a little game you may not have heard of called The House Abandoned for a demo, which eventually became a full game because it did so well, known as Tales Untold, I believe it was called, or Stories Untold? Stories Untold, I think. And I played through that. It's a text adventure. It's almost like a visual novel with a little bit of interactivity. And the stories are incredible. They are so well done and build so much atmosphere. The music that was added with it is some of my favorite music ever. if you want some good kind of creepy retro wave music to listen to after you hear this video, go check out the OST for The House Abandoned. And God, it's got such a beautiful sound to it. I love it. The ideas that they had were incredible. They were very meta in the sense of messing with you, the player, and the way games like in the past Eternal Darkness did. For example, you start out the first game, and I guess spoiler alert if you haven't played it, but it's still worth playing it. You're in a house where you're visiting family. They're not there, so you just sit down and decide to start going through your old stuff. You find a disc and you pop it into the computer. It's one of the 5 1/4 discs from ages ago, and you start playing a little text adventure, and the text adventure starts to match up to your life as you're in the game, and it gets really creepy in that sense. I won't go any farther so I don't fully spoil it, but it's worth playing through. The other stories all connect to that story and then overall make an entire full story of the character that you are in this game. And even his story is tragic, or her story. I don't know if they ever really go about it, giving it a gender that of what you're playing as a character. But you play through these different stories that all interconnect and eventually become one big story. And it turns out to be like a really tragic ending that I thought was really beautiful. Very somber, not over the top horror effects, no jump scares, nothing like that. It's just a very somber man-made horror where the tragedy of life is what the true horror is in the game. And I think that's why they can probably write a pretty amazing Silent Hill game. I remember when I was young, when I first played Silent Hill 1, and I started to think about, why is this game so creepy to me? There's not like blood or monsters jumping out and attacking me. There's not like Resident Evil type dogs busting through the window and, making my heart jump into my throat. But even just walking around, I'm constantly tense and scared. I remember finding the piano in the school and thinking that was so creepy to sit around in this abandoned school. And I realized what Silent Hill does so well is take the parts of our lives that we find so depressing that they become scary and amp them up to 100%. Like they do a great work of taking everyday things that make us feel slightly uncomfortable and then just amping it up all the way. And that's what No Code did with their games that they made, their text adventure games. So the game that they're going to make called Silent Hill Townfall, I already saw just a tiny bit of what it almost looked like FMV video, but I think it's actually graphics that are so good they look like their video. And already it was starting to look a little creepy. So, I mean, they don't have any story represented yet. They don't have any plots or who you are or what it's about. So I can't really speak to that. But I will say it is a team that I definitely trust writing it. And I don't trust every single team with how they're going to do on this. So we'll get into that, though, as we move on. Next up, they talked about Silent Hill, the movie. They're going to make more Silent Hill movies. This is one part I was not very excited about. I know some people love the movies. That's fine. Silent Hill 1 was kind of okay. Silent Hill 2, I thought was just bonkers. Silent Hill 2 made me think the director who says he loves the Silent Hill games, which it's like, are you sure you do? Because it seems like you don't know anything about them. If he loves the games, does that mean like his kid was playing the game and every once in a while he poked his head in to ask him, son, are you winning? And like just saw some creepy images and thought like, that'd be cool to put in a movie. Because that's kind of what it was. It was just like they threw in imagery from the game around a story that had little to nothing to do with the games themselves. They kind of deal with this whole cult idea. And part one, they kind of deal properly with the fact that in the games, the little girl is sacrificed, I guess burned, and then separated into two different beings, and one gets reborn. But in the second movie, it just, God, the acting's bad, the story's bad. The effects are kind of cool. Like, I remember the mannequin monster looked awesome, but it just kind of out of nowhere. You're just kind of like, why is this here? Like, where is she right now? Like, The guy who's got like the giant axe head through his helmet, he kind of just jumps on top of the elevator, and I thought like, well, why is he even in this building? Like, what is his backstory? In the game, if you read up on all the enemies, they all have their own lore that gives them a backstory. So, but in the movie, it was just like, well, you probably already know. Okay, anyway, enjoy. And I remember Jon Snow being in it and him being part of the cult, and he has the giant symbol carved into his stomach, and I just thought like, this is so silly. Like, this is, oh well. So I don't really feel that excited. From what it looks like, they have some of the same people producing and directing it, and like I said, I don't think the other movies were really that great, so I don't have a lot of hope for the future movies either. Game movies in general tend to be pretty bad. Rarely do I see one that blows my mind, so I'm not expecting a lot. If they do, I would love it. I really wish someone would do Silent Hill justice. I understand they could totally come up with their own story and lore, because Silent Hill is more so a theme rather than an actual town anymore. It's a theme of like revenge or repentance or redemption, and it could be hosted anywhere within anybody's life, and it's more of a theme now. So I think you could do something really amazing with that, and with the monsters and everything. I just don't think that's going to happen. So I don't have a lot of faith for the movie. That's my final words on it. The next one is Ascension, and I couldn't really fully grasp what this was. This Ascension, Silent Hill Ascension. Maybe you guys in the comments can more so better explain it to me. I tried to figure out more information on this, and it appears to be a sort of ARG / mobile game, and I don't mean like a mobile game in the sense of like a gotcha game or something. Like you don't collect Pyramid Head and mannequin monsters, and but it seems like you'll be able to play in a way that's like simulacra. I can't say the word simulacra. Okay, I think I got it that time. If you've played those games, they're really good. The Simulacra games. The Simulacra 3 just came out. If you haven't played those games before, you should. They're really amazing. So I think there is something good they can do with that. In those games, you come across a smartphone that has been lost by someone who was kidnapped, and by unlocking parts of the phone, you find out what their full story is. And if that's what they're doing with this Ascension, that might turn out pretty awesome. That could be pretty creepy and pretty unique. But they don't really explain it well enough to tell you if that's really what they're doing. That was the only thing I could think where I was like, well, that would really work with Silent Hill if you made it the whole I find a solo smartphone on the street and start going through it and find out the person's been spirited away to Silent Hill. That'd be pretty sick. But in it, they're talking about like, players are going to interact with each other online and send each other messages and figure out clues together, which, if you remember PT, that's kind of how PT came together. So it's cool to see that Konami picked up on that people dissected, went through and picked apart the PT aspect that allowed them to work together to solve the mystery of what was going on in PT, like, translate the radio and find out what the numbers meant and see about the ghost in the game and find out about the child that died and what was played on the radio. And I loved how the community came together to solve all those, and they said that's what Ascension is. It's going to be a community project for players of the Silent Hill series. So I think something pretty incredible could be done with that. But if it does just turn out to be like a gotcha game on smartphones, then I'm going to be pretty disappointed. I hope it's not something like that. I do realize these days it seems like a lot of games are turning to mobile to try and just scoop up loads of money in very despicable ways, such as, Diablo Immortal or Torchlight Infinite. I'm not impressed by those games. I'm actually disgusted by that kind of work done on smartphones. Okay. What else do we got here? Oh, Silent Hill 2. I'm going to talk about Silent Hill F or Silent Hill Fortissimo. I don't know exactly, but I'm going to talk about Silent Hill 2 first. I am a little bit worried about it, but a little bit not so worried. They've given it to Bloober Team, and I've played every single one of Bloober Team's games. If you don't know Bloober Team, they made. Oh, actually, you know what? I didn't play the Witch. What? I'm forgetting the Salem Witch, the Witch in the Woods, the movie about the witch. God, why can I not remember it now? Anyway, they made Layers of Fear 2, Observer. Those are all pretty decent games. Layers of Fear 2, I kind of feel so about. And the movie based on the witch. Why can I not? I can't remember the name of the witch. And Layers of Fear 1, I really liked. A lot of people dogged it because they said it was a PT clone and that like it had little to no story, and the ghost in it was almost a mock-up of the ghost from PT, and that the melting face picture looked like the guy from Indiana Jones when the faces melt from looking at the Ark of the Covenant. And they're right. Those things are definitely all taken. They're all representations of that imagery, and people want to yell at Bloober Team for borrowing those imagery ideas, but I feel like that's kind of silly because even Silent Hill itself borrowed imagery. I mean, nothing is original in 2022, let's be honest. If you don't already know, Silent Hill borrowed a lot of their imagery from Francis Bacon paintings, the paintings of the Pope, from Jacob's Ladder with like the shaking heads and the caving in ceiling and the everything around you is going nuts, and the doctors and nurses have blank skin covered faces. So I mean, everybody borrows imagery from somewhere, and yeah, probably Bloober Team did borrow a lot of those, but they did put the setting in a sort of like 1800s, I think it was, setting, and they used a lot of paintings that had a lot of sort of despicable backgrounds to them that were kind of gross, like Saturn eating his son. So I thought they did pretty good. I enjoyed the game. I played through it 2 times. Layers of Fear 2, it got way more abstract. Apparently that was originally totally written by them. Blair Witch Project, finally I remember the name of the movie. They made a game about that. That was kind of their original idea too. And both of those games kind of have too abstract of an idea to even follow. Like it's kind of like they kind of had an idea and then either ran out of steam or lost energy in creating a full story and fleshing everything out. In Layers of Fear 2, you're an actor who's going crazy or trying to make a role for themselves by method acting and becoming and using your past tragedies to make the character for the movie. And while there were some good ideas kind of in there, again, there was a lot of borrowed stuff people complained about. I don't really care so much about that. Obviously, Blair Witch Project borrowed everything from the movie, but they were licensed to make that game, so it makes sense that they did that. I didn't particularly like the fact that the dog dies in that game. Spoiler alert for a game that's not so great. And also the fact that like you kind of pick up the legacy of whatever the Blair Witch is in that, which appears to be like a homeless man possessed by the Blair Witch. The whole idea was kind of silly. It was just kind of like, well, he never actually gets lost in the woods. He could just leave at any time, unlike the movie where they can't find their way back to their car. And he still has a walkie-talkie that he can talk to people on the whole time. So it was kind of silly in that sense and kind of way too linear. I wasn't very impressed by that. Observer, I loved. Very, cyberpunk, very dark, existential transhumanism, as in transhumanism in the sense of human intelligence placed into a mechanical body and kind of the horrors that can come along with that. I thought they did a very good job with that, really exploring some of the ideas from there. Some people were just like, oh, yeah, you just totally stole the idea from Blade Runner. But no, that's not what Blade Runner was about. Blade Runner was more about like extending the life of these nearly people and who deserves an extended life and how will we treat AI in the future? Will they be treated like human if they have human emotions? Are their feelings not valid? Are their lives not valid? Um, that wasn't the same thing in Observer. Observer dealt with like, when are we done being human and become fully, I guess, synchronized with full robotics? Kind of the Sisyphusian theory of, if you replace everything, is it still the original thing? I thought they did a really good job with that. I enjoyed it. So I've blabbered on way too long about Bloober, but I just wanted to kind of give a background about why I feel the way I do about them doing Silent Hill 2. I think if they stick to the same story and don't try to change it, although I have heard they're going to try and modernize it, which I kind of understand to some extent. I mean, if you think about it, you know, James would be using a smartphone at this point. And so maybe they're going to modernize it in that sense. I heard they're going to try and modernize the story, but I just hope they don't change it that much. If you don't know the story for Silent Hill 2, he arrives to the town looking for his wife who has died. She sends him a letter. You find all this out at the very beginning of the game, like from the second it starts. And actually, speaking of that, I wanted to cut to a little extra footage I have, kind of a sneak peek that not a lot of people have seen of James at the beginning of the new Silent Hill 2. And maybe why I'm a little bit worried about it. I don't know how serious they're going to take it. Take a look at this.
That could be my dead wife in a gimp suit.
Just joking. Sorry, I had to include that in something. That always got me. That was Pong Sifu or Pong Shifu. If you want to check out his channel, he has some pretty funny videos about playing Silent Hill. Anyway, let's go on to what you really want to hear about, and that is Silent Hill F, or Silent Hill Fortissimo. If you're wondering why I'm calling it Fortissimo, the F you see in the Silent Hill F reveal is the Fortissimo sign for music. So I don't know if it's going to have some sort of musical connection. We don't know about anything yet. All we know is what we see in the reveal of the trailer for it, and it shows a pretty decent amount. They say it's not in-game footage as far as like you playing the game, but I have a feeling the in-game footage is not going to be that much different anymore. Cutscenes usually don't look that different from in-game action, so hopefully that's true with this game too. Let's take a look, and I'll kind of comment on it as it plays. If you want to look at this whole thing without me talking over it, just go watch the presentation. If I just play this without talking, I think there's no point. Here we go. So right away, the thing I like seeing is that it is in Japan, set in about the 1960s, post-World War II. Yes, I do realize World War II did not end in 1960, but Japan was still recovering from the war in 1960. So you're seeing a lot of the imagery, how, the old structures used to look. We got a lot of the old school wood houses with the shoji doors and the very, very old school aesthetics as far as even the school uniform the girl is wearing. You got the little temples on the street. We still have stuff like that here in Japan, but they're not quite as common. And some of the temples have even been modernized. You'd be surprised how modern they are. She's walking through an alley. Vines are grabbing her, and we're seeing bruising all over her body, and her skin seems to be kind of messed up. Her clothes are ripped off, and as she gets to the end here, we start to see these flowers bloom. I forget exactly what these flowers are called, but they actually have a lot of stories written about them in Japan, where they are an actual poison flower that was brought over from the first foreigners who came to Japan before Japan closed their gates to foreigners before the start of World War II. If you don't know the history of Japan, people did come to Japan before World War II. They kind of forced themselves on Japan and just came in and tried to create trade routes, and then were eventually pushed out. And that kind of launched Japan into their very nationalistic and empire-driven accolades of World War II, of taking over parts of China and all other parts of the world and stuff, trying to go on an epic war. That they were just angry that foreigners had come over. Of course, there's nothing like that anymore. Japanese are very welcoming and they're very anti-war at this point. But this flower was one of the things that came over, and it is a poisonous flower. If you put it into some kind of tea or something like that, it's very easy to poison someone. It's been written into a lot of like murder mystery novels and stuff. Back in the early 1950s of Japan, you read about it in those. And that's probably why they're using this poisonous flower, because what they're dealing with is post-World War II poison. And I'm sure you know what the biggest poison that hit Japan after World War II was: the atomic bomb. If you notice, there's a part near almost the end where they show a torii gate. A torii gate is usually used to keep out demons or bad spirits. And then they show a girl sitting on a land, a little island, and her skin starts to become distorted, deformed. Her face peels off and falls to the ground. And if you go back and read descriptions of what people saw post-World War II or post-nuclear bomb, these were the horrors that they witnessed in their country. Some people were turned to ash or turned to shadows immediately when the atomic bomb hit, if they were in the center of it. And other people were left with their skin peeling off their body. It's horrific to read about. If you do go back and read it, it's just so horrifying that it makes your heart break to read about what these poor civilians had to go through. They weren't even the people in the war. They were merely trying to live their everyday life. And, I have seen in the past America make the excuse, well, we dropped flyers all over Nagasaki and Hiroshima before we dropped the bomb. And it's like, well, I mean, there's so many lies going around during war and so much fake propaganda that if the Japanese ignored those flyers and the government told them to ignore it, that doesn't really make a very good excuse for killing, nearly 10% of the population by nuking them. I don't think there's any good excuse to nuke any part of the world. In fact, I'm very anti-nuke in general, and Hiroshima stands for that to this day. They have the eternal flame there, and some of the buildings left over from the nuclear bomb to always remind them just how horrible it was. That's why this new Russia thing with Ukraine and them talking about using nuclear weapons is very scary to me. We're seeing the horrors of what lasts past the end of the war. A struggling Japan, people who didn't have enough food, they didn't have shelter. Most buildings were absolutely carpet bombed into oblivion. They were desperate to do anything and everything to try and survive. You see her running with her skin being all messed up and bruised like it was post-World War II from people who had the post-effects of the bomb. There was many stories of people who were just sitting there like statues, and when military came to try and help them, they wouldn't talk or respond. They would just say things like, I'm too hot, I'm too thirsty. And the military would literally try to pick these people up and put them on gurneys, and like their skin would slough off like you saw in the end of this little trailer. So, I mean, that's definitely a callback to that. It's disgusting to even have to talk about that, the fact that this is actually a real life thing. And you could see where that would lead to a lot of real life horror. I think sending this in the 1960s Japan totally makes sense. If you want to see some of the horrors of that time, I would suggest, and like, only watch this if you have a strong stomach, and every trigger warning possible before you watch this. It's called Midori, and it shows a girl trying to survive post-World War II with little to no food, no place to live because her mother dies, and people around her getting sick and leaving her life. And she joins a circus, a traveling circus, and it's just, this is the kind of horror I imagine post-World War II. People having to do things they didn't want to do to survive. Another good one to watch for reference how bad life was post-World War II is Grave of the Fireflies, where you literally see a young boy try to take care of his younger sister, and then both eventually starve to death and become like skeletons for how much they're starving. I mean, Japan was in such a bad way post World War II that the government put out flyers on how to scrape bark off of trees to make soups that people could eat. That's how bad it was. I don't think a lot of history books teach us this kind of stuff, especially in America, because I think a lot of people don't want to face the fact that America was also horrible during World War II. There was no heroes. There was no country full of heroes. There was heroic things done, but no country was a hero. There was mass casualty, mass innocent life loss, and horrors committed by all countries. So I think that's what Japan is dealing with in this Silent Hill Fortissimo or Silent Hill F. And the best thing I heard about it, just like I was excited for Silent Hill Townfall, no, I told you I heard no code was writing for it. And I think the writing is probably the most important part of Silent Hill. Well, for Silent Hill F or Fortissimo or whatever it's going to be called, the writer of Higurashi no Nakakoro ni, or When They Cry, you might know it as When They Cry. I believe his name is Ryukishi07. He is writing that. He's writing the story for it. He wrote Higurashi. And that's a good series. That's a really good series. It took me a while to comprehend and to get into, but if you give that series its due time, it turns out to be a very beautifully crafted horror story. And the reason it is beautifully crafted is because Ryukishi takes the time to really flesh out the characters so that first you can connect with the characters, you can sympathize with the characters, you can kind of almost like fall in love with these characters, like kind of really fall in love with like the relationships they have, the friendships they form, the daily life that they live in rural Japan, and then see how that devolves into total horror using things that could actually happen in real life, like disease or murder or betrayal or people losing their sanity. And if he's entering those same themes into a Silent Hill game, I think that's a perfect combination. The only thing I would worry about maybe is he does tend to take a really long time to develop the horror aspects. He does a very slow burn into the horror. He spends a lot of time, and he's granted a lot of time in the games that he made and the eventual anime too, of the characters doing everyday things like just simply playing cards or a board game or hide and go seek or just hanging out in the park. And that lets you connect to the characters. But I think some people might be taken aback if he spends too much time doing this. I hope he realizes like there's a kind of a time limit when it comes to Silent Hill fans. We do want to see the creepiness start pretty fast. I think there's things you can do to properly build up to that. And for example, in the Silent Hill, what was the one with the Frozen Memories, I think it was called. I played that one. That was a PS Vita, I remember. And I like the fact that that one started with you and your kid having a great time at an amusement park, and then the VCR that the man is watching it on stops, and it keeps skipping back to that part where she says, "I love my daddy, I love my daddy, I love my..." And like, I think that was just the right amount of time to build up relationships where you see like what the pain of this man's life is, that he's pained because his daughter died and he loved her very much. And that's something very easy for a human to connect to, as far as, you know, human interaction, human love, friendship, parenthood, childhood. He's very good at getting the human emotions across, which I think there is some Silent Hill games that failed in that in the past, such as Homecoming and Downpour. There was like no humanity to it. You just had these very lifeless, boring characters who were, you know, not complex, just kind of, how would I say, they were just very unbelievable. Like the one guy says he's returned from the military, and then you find out he never was in the military. He was just crazy. And you're just kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess you could change the story to that. But nobody in the town said anything like, hey, how did you escape from the asylum? You just find out all this stuff at the end, and his character's never developed. It's just kind of huge exposition drop. That's, I think, what Ryukishi does well with his Higurashi series is he naturally does exposition and fleshes out the characters long enough that you have a good idea naturally through watching them do everyday life things of who they are, what their motives are, what their agenda is, what their pain is, and how that's going to affect them as the story develops. So I really, really look forward to that. I think I covered just about everything that was done in the presentation. If I forgot anything, please let me know. I'll do a follow-up and give you my feelings on that. Until next time, I have been Unrested, and I hope you enjoyed this video on the new Silent Hill games today.